Hi, and welcome to In Search of Insight, Nootropics Depot's monthly podcast. I'm your podcast host, Erika, and sitting next to me is our product specialist at Nootropics Depot, Emiel.
Hey, everyone.
Today, Emiel and I are very excited to announce a long-awaited product, probably Nootropics Depot's most important product to date, the Eurycomax stack.
This one's been in development for a really long time, as many of you know, because you've been asking for it for a very long time. It's been out for a couple of weeks now. We've seen a lot of user reports come in, and we thought this would be the perfect time to now make a podcast about it. Go a little bit more in depth, share maybe some of those reports we've seen, share my own report, and see how it works kind of on the spot. Erika has only tried it once on accident. I make both of our supplements, and one time I put it in Erika's stack, and only later I was like, I think I put just one capsule of it in your stack. And how did you feel on that?
Well, to be honest, not a whole lot different, and that's why I'm looking forward to taking just a normal dose of Eurycomax today on the podcast to see what it feels like. This is probably not a product that I will include in my daily stack, but let's see if my opinion changes by the end after I've learned all the nitty-gritty science behind it, because for those of you who are familiar with it, this is our advanced Tongkat Ali stack, and this one's really going to be helpful for just balancing your testosterone and your hormonal profile and also building muscle. And while this can be super beneficial for men and women, perhaps this is a little bit more focused on male muscle building and might not be exactly the product that I'm looking for, but I'm very curious to learn about why you and a lot of other of you, viewers, listeners, have been trying it and having really positive effects.
And I will just say I don't totally agree with you that this is more of a male-focused product, because I think Tongkat Ali works really well for women too. We've seen that over and over. I've talked to various women who are taking Tongkat Ali, and it works well for them. And like Erika mentioned, on the one hand, this is an advanced Eurycoma longifolia. That's the scientific name for Tongkat Ali stack. But on the other side, it's really nicely balanced, and I actually think because of that, this is the Tongkat Ali you want to take if you've never taken Tongkat Ali before, because it's kind of perfect. And for that reason, how balanced it is, I think it will actually work particularly well for women. So I am curious how you respond to just a single dose, which, by the way, a single dose is 2 capsules. So when I accidentally gave Erika a single capsule, kind of just on autopilot, it was within her stack with Systemax and some other things, because Erika does take Systemax, and you respond really well to that.
I really like this one, yeah.
You have taken Tongkat Ali in the past, and you weren't a huge fan of it. There were some benefits, and I think why you were not a huge fan of it is because in its stock standard form, it seems to be a little bit unbalanced for certain people. Tongkat Ali works well for really a lot of people, but some people aren't a huge fan of it. Some people experience some side effects with it, and we tried to ameliorate that with Eurycomax, and I think we really succeeded in that. We've seen some reports, and I can tell you from my own personal experience, I'm more on Team Systanch. I love Systanch. I've taken it for many years. I can't really imagine life without it. And I haven't been taking it for the last 3 weeks, and I've switched to this, and I've really liked the Eurycomax stack. More so than I've ever liked Tongkat Ali before. So I do think for those of you who are also watching this, you've maybe tried Tongkat Ali in the past, and you weren't super happy with all of the effects you got, but you were very into maybe the mood effects in the start, the libido effects in the start, and some of the strength gains, then I think you'll really like this one. Like every podcast, we are actually going to take some Eurycomax, and you can kind of see it kicking in for us. So we're going to do that right now, so there's enough time in this about our podcast where you may be at around the half hour, 45-minute mark. We'll see us saying a few things.
So Emiel will be providing all of the in-depth scientific information about this product. Thank you. 2 capsule is just the standard dose. And I will be asking all the questions that might be typical of any of you who are skeptical about this product, but also especially women who are skeptical about using a product like this, which from the outside can seem and sound like a product which is designed for men. But let's see if my opinion changes over time at the end of this podcast.
And I do totally agree with Erika. This is a product that is primarily formulated for men. but I don't think it is exclusive to men, and I think women can benefit a lot from a little bit of extra testosterone, especially if you've gone through menopause, because you make estrogen from testosterone, and after menopause there's a lack of estrogen, there's a lack of testosterone, and you can get that back up with something like Tongkat Ali. And testosterone is also very, very important for female libido. That is something I think a lot of people miss. That is especially important after menopause. So I think there is some unique use cases for Eurycomax, maybe even in half a dose as a little bit of a modification, not too much. But I think a bit of a testosterone boost is going to be beneficial for both men and women, but obviously the male body and brain is more geared towards higher levels of testosterone. We respond to it in a more dramatic way. Women don't necessarily in such a dramatic way, which is why I think it's actually a really good product for women too. But let's take this and see what Erika thinks.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Okay, so before we get started in the super intense mechanisms of action and all of the science behind the formulation, I want to ask, why is this product one that you recommend for people who've never taken a Tongkat Ali extract before?
Well, and that's a good way to start, because I was actually thinking that too. There is a lot of mechanisms of action to cover here. I don't want to get too intense in the first half hour. So for everyone here, maybe you're not as familiar with Tongkat Ali, you're wondering, why should I take this? You want to keep it a little bit more surface level. The first half hour is for you. If you really want to get deep, we're going to get deeper into it once this is starting to kick in a little bit, and I can tell you a little bit more. Now, back to your question. Sorry. You were saying, why would you want to take a Tongkat Ali extract?
Why would you want to take Eurycomax if you've never really taken a Tongkat Ali extract? What makes this good as sort of a beginner introductory stack?
So I think this is good as a beginner introductory stack because the effects are so smooth and they're so well balanced. And I think for people who aren't totally used to a testosterone booster, taking something like the Tongkat Ali 10% Eurycomax extract, that's our strongest extract. It's very specific extract. It has a very clean but powerful effect. I think something like that can be a little bit jarring. It's quite far removed from what the plant in its natural environment, in its natural form, would have to offer. So with something that's so high in Eurycomax, we're doing very, very technologically advanced extraction methodologies, and what ends up happening is that you really hyper-focus on Eurycomax. And sorry, I'm already getting a little bit in-depth. Eurycomax is one of the primary bioactives, so you'll hear us talk about that a lot. That's a big focus of this stack too. Now, the approach we took with Eurycomax was we wanted to hit on that Eurycomax level. There's a lot of research on Eurycomax. Eurycomax is the main driver in Tongkat Ali, but it's not the only compound in Tongkat Ali. So Eurycomax is a quasinoid compound. There's a lot of other quasinoids in Tongkat Ali that also have beneficial effects. But most of the research is on Eurycomax. So we wanted to have a base level of Eurycomax. Now, if you take our Tongkat Ali 10%, that's in 100 milligram doses, so you get 10 milligrams of Eurycomax. We have another Tongkat Ali extract that I think is a bit more of a beginner-friendly Tongkat Ali extract, and that's the 2%. With the 2%, the dosage is 200 milligrams, so you're going to get 4 milligrams of Eurycomax, which for some people is not totally enough, but they do like the mood effects, but it isn't totally there for the testosterone and strength enhancement. So I think Eurycomax is a really good option because it's right in the middle at 7 milligrams of total Eurycomax. And there's two ways in which we achieve this. The first is to use that 10% Eurycomax extract. So I'm just going to pause for a little while. There's sirens going by. It's probably annoying. We'll be back. That's better. No more sirens. We're back. Okay, so Eurycomax contains 7 milligrams of Eurycomax, and that's coming from a little bit of the 10% Tongkat Ali extract, and that's our main source of Eurycomax. But then we also, on top of that, added in a totally new Tongkat Ali extract, and that one is a cold water ultrasonic assisted extract. Now this sounds quite technologically advanced because it is. There's a couple of reasons why we did this. There are perhaps some thermolabile compounds in Tongkat Ali. So thermolabile means maybe there are compounds in there that degrade under pretty low levels of heat. So during normal extraction, we're usually hitting temperatures up to about 100 degrees Celsius, boiling temperatures, which for most things is totally fine. There are maybe some things in Tongkat Ali that degrade a little bit. One of these things, and this is a little bit controversial, is uripeptides. There's a lot of research that seems to focus on this uripeptide compound. It doesn't seem to have been quantified as a real thing. We've tried for many years to find some way to test for it, to get some clear answer on what uripeptides are. There isn't that much information. What we do know is that peptides are heat sensitive. So if there really is a peptide in there that is having a beneficial effect, then we probably want to approach it with cold water or a cold solvent. And in this case, we're just using water. Eurycomax is soluble in water. Some of the other quasinoids are soluble in water. The uripeptide should be soluble in water too. However, when you're doing a water extract, you usually want to have some extra energy in there. That extra energy is going to help you extract things more efficiently. Normally, that extra energy is coming in the form of heat. So you heat something up, you can extract it more easily. Think about it with tea, for example. If you put some tea leaves in cold water and wait 5 minutes and then drink that cold water, it's basically going to taste like cold water. If you keep that cold water in your fridge for 24 hours, then it will taste like nice tea with a completely different profile because maybe some of these thermolabile aroma compounds haven't gotten broken down. We like doing this a lot.
This is one of my favorite ways to make iced tea, yes.
But it takes a really long time. Alternatively, if you use boiling water and you do the same thing, then within 5 minutes you might have actually over-extracted your tea already. So that extra energy in the form of heat drastically speeds up the extraction of compounds, the solubility of those compounds in the solvent, in this case water. Same thing, for example, if you're trying to make simple syrup or something like that. If you're trying to dissolve sugar in cold water, it ain't gonna work. If you try to dissolve sugar in boiling water, it's gonna go very quickly. Okay, so that's the energy thing. Now, what if we're using cold water and we don't have that energy from heat? We can add energy in other ways. One of those is with ultrasonic vibrations. So vibrations at a very, very high frequency and it shakes things up and it causes this thing called cavitation, which just explodes the cell walls and allows compounds to be extracted into a solvent when it's cold. And that's a really unique thing about ultrasonic assisted extracts. You can do it at room temperature or you can even do it at cold temperatures, and that's what we're doing. And that should have pulled out a lot of different bioactive compounds and give you a much more true representation of the Tongkat Ali root without having to take multiple grams of it, because the concentration of bioactives in Tongkat Ali is not concentrated enough where you can really have good luck using it natively, so non-extracted. We want to have some sort of extract. We want to keep everything in there as much as possible, and I think the cold water ultrasonic assisted extract did that. And if we look at the chromatogram, so basically we take that cold water assisted ultrasonic extract, cold water assisted, ultrasonic assisted cold water extract of Tongkat Ali. We run it through our analytical instrument, I believe in this case was our UPLC, and we see the chromatogram and we see lots of little peaks, lots of little things that are similar to Eurycomax, so different quasinoids, flavonoids, maybe some alkaloids, things that are not in the Eurycomax 10% extract, so the Tongkat Ali 10% extract, because that one is chromatographically separated. It has very high levels of Eurycomax, and if we look at our chromatogram, we basically see nothing, one big bip of Eurycomax. So very isolated, missing a lot of those other things that might make Tongkat Ali feel more mood boosting, more confidence boosting, smoother, more balanced, whatever it may be. So we tried lots of different extracts. The cold water ultrasonic assisted extract hit exactly that on the chromatogram, and also feeling wise. It felt like the 2% but better. So the 2% Tongkat Ali compared to the 10% Tongkat Ali, we've always said that the 2% has more of a mood boosting quality. It's the one you want to take if you just want to feel good, not necessarily if you want to maximize your gains in the gym. 10% is more for maximizing your gains in a gym, not necessarily for feeling good. So we wanted both of those in one product. And that's why I was also saying earlier, this might actually be a really good beginner product, because it gives you both of those strength increases and the feel good aspects. And that's really what that blend achieved. And from the sounds of it, it works really well. One other problem that, for example, the 2% Tongkat Ali has is that if you take it on an empty stomach, a lot of people got nauseous. I think there might be some saponins in there that are foaming in your stomach and can make you feel a little bit nauseous. When you eat with the Tongkat Ali 2% Eurycomax extract, that usually goes away. So I do think it is something about some sort of irritant, some sort of saponin, and that is not present in the cold water ultrasonic assisted extract, from as far as I can tell. I don't necessarily have an issue with the nausea. You do. So
yes,
if
yes.
Erika gets nauseous, like Erika gets like really like projectile vomiting nauseous with the 2% if she takes it on empty stomach.
Yeah.
And it's been a few hours since we've eaten. So if you get nauseous, you know why it is.
Yes.
But I don't think you're going to, because I haven't heard anyone complain about it. So again, very beginner friendly. Now, moving on from that, so that covers the Tongkat Ali portion. And we put a whole bunch of other things in there. And that's because people have side effects with normal Tongkat Ali. And these are complex. And this is why it took a really long time to figure this stack out, because we wanted to balance those things. And over the years, we've chatted with many Redditors, you've put your reviews up, we've talked to a lot of our customers about what they like about Tongkat Ali and what they don't like about Tongkat Ali. So a few things have come up, more experientially, people just reporting how they feel, but also blood tests. And two kind of big things that have come up is, one, after a while, people start getting some joint issues, their libido goes down, they generally just don't feel as good. For anyone in the bodybuilding world, you probably recognize this as maybe a decrease in estradiol, and you would be correct. So estradiol is an estrogen, E2, and part of the way that Tongkat Ali increases testosterone is by lowering estradiol. Good for the most part until your estradiol levels really start to drop. And estradiol is important for men and women especially, but for men too, because estradiol has anti-inflammatory effects, it has mood-boosting properties, it actually has anabolic properties, it's really good for libido, it protects your joints, it protects your bones. If estradiol levels really start dropping, a lot of people start to report some joint soreness, some decreases in libido, some decreases in mood. And this is quite a well-known phenomenon at this point, and there's been lots of work on Reddit being done. How do we counteract that? One of the ideas I had a couple of years ago is horny goat weed. Horny goat weed contains a compound called Icariin, and Icariin increases the activity of an enzyme called aromatase. And aromatase converts testosterone into estradiol. And one of the things that Tongkat Ali does is it inhibits the aromatase enzyme, and this is one of the ways in which it actually enhances testosterone. So that's a good thing. However, for some people it seems to be too much of a good thing, so we want to correct that a little bit. So we put a small dose of the horny goat weed 10% Icariin extract in there. And the horny goat weed 10% we also find to have a really nice relaxing mood boosting effect. So that's also one of the reasons we put the 10% in there and not our 50% Icariin extract, which we also carry. But the 10% specifically has a nice mood boosting property that we found worked well with the Tongkat Ali blend. But the real reason it's in there is to kind of counteract those decreases in estradiol, but not too extreme. And this seems to be working really well so far for the people who have been trying it. Another cool thing that the Horny Goat weed does is that it is a PDE5 inhibitor. So PDE5 is an enzyme that breaks down a compound that dilates your blood vessels. And so basically, if you're taking nitric oxide boosters and things like that, one of the ways in which it increases vasodilation is by ramping up the production of cGMP, and cGMP eventually dilates your blood vessels. cGMP is broken down by PDE5, so if you take a PDE5 inhibitor, more cGMP, more vasodilation. There are many very famous PDE5 inhibitors. One of them starts with Vi, ends with Gra. You can probably figure that one out. So that's a really cool thing about Horny Goat weed. It enhances blood flow, which we'll touch on a little bit later, but that's obviously going to be good for erections, and Eurycomax is a really good libido booster, so that's an added bonus as well. Now, if we talk about libido, and that's obviously going to be a big part of any testosterone booster, one thing that also seems to happen with Tongkat Ali, with other testosterone boosters, is that prolactin goes up a little bit. And prolactin going up is not a good thing for libido. And I think this is why a lot of people have really good effects with Tongkat Ali, and then it turns on them. So in that beginning period, they're not having any issues with prolactin, maybe no issues with estradiol, but after a few weeks, after a few months, prolactin issues start to pop up, and some issues maybe with estradiol start to pop up. So how do we counteract this? Well, a really good way in which to counteract prolactin increases is by increasing dopamine, because dopamine has an antagonistic effect on prolactin. So if dopamine is high, prolactin is low. If dopamine is low, prolactin is high. So to ameliorate this effect, we put in some Mucuna Puriens standardized for L-Dopa. Now we went for a very full spectrum Mucuna Puriens, which only has 15% L-Dopa. So for those of you not in the know, straight L-Dopa, like if you have 98% L-Dopa, and you're taking high doses of it, it doesn't seem to be the best thing long term. There's definitely some concerns about that. L-Dopa is also used in the pharmaceutical industry, and we see issues with that in high doses. Now with Mucuna Puriens in lower standardization amounts, there's been a lot of scientific evidence for it not having some of those issues, especially if the overall dose of L-Dopa is low. So there is something to be said for taking Mucuna Puriens that has not been over-extracted and over-purified, and there's something to be said for having a low overall dose. Now, L-Dopa, for those of you that don't know, is a direct precursor to dopamine. So usually how we make dopamine is we consume L-tyrosine, an amino acid that's found in our diet, and that L-tyrosine gets turned into L-Dopa through a rate-limiting enzyme. So that rate-limiting enzyme means that L-tyrosine conversion to L-Dopa, it just stops at a certain point. If there's too much L-Dopa, if there's too much if there's too much L-Dopa, that mechanism basically gets shut off, it gets saturated. So you can keep adding in more L-tyrosine, but nothing will happen. No extra conversion to L-Dopa will happen. Now with L-Dopa, you don't have a rate-limiting enzyme between L-Dopa and dopamine. You can keep feeding yourself as much L-Dopa as you want, and it will create as much dopamine as you want. And this is obviously where the issues come from, because too much dopamine is not good for you. Dopamine oxidizes, and then it becomes a very strong oxidant throughout your brain. It can cause some movement issues. Generally not a good thing to have just really, really high levels of dopamine floating around. But if you do that at a low level, having a little bit of L-Dopa is really cool, because you don't have to wait for that L-tyrosine to get converted to L-Dopa and then for that L-Dopa to get converted to dopamine. You just immediately have L-Dopa available, and that gives you a quick dopamine boost. And that's why I was saying earlier, you will probably be able to see us report an effect within about 30 minutes, but that effect is just going to be the L-Dopa.
I feel really good. I feel relaxed.
Oh, you feel it already?
I feel quite focused. I do. I do think I feel something. Oftentimes on the podcast, when I'm listening really carefully to this in-depth information, which is beyond my personal scope, you're the one doing all the heavy research. I can get a little bit bogged down or a little bit overwhelmed, but today I find that it's easy to follow along, so it's going really great. Nice work so far.
Nice.
And I also feel excited by the conversation so far.
Good.
This is not always the case, and I'm interested in the products, but sometimes just this relaxed listening position that I'm in makes it easy to kind of trail off and focus, and also to just settle into the couch. But today I don't feel that. I feel really present.
Nice.
And it's not overwhelming, and it's definitely not overstimulating either. So this is kind of in a happy middle ground.
Great. And I don't actually know how long it's been. Do you know? Can you see on the camera how long we've been recording?
It's been almost 30 minutes.
Okay. But I think the camera's been recording a little bit longer because
exactly.
we were setting up and had a retake.
Yes,
so
yeah.
I think it's been about 20 minutes
25 minutes or so.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I can feel it a little bit too. I'm a little bit more familiar with the effect already because I've been taking it every day for the last 3 weeks or so. So it's subtle, and that's really what we were going for. Now, usually on these podcasts, we would take like double, triple, quadruple the dose. One of the reasons I decided not to do that for Eurycomax is because I didn't want this to become a podcast all about L-Dopa. If we took a quadruple or even a double dose of this, those effects of L-Dopa are going to become a lot more noticeable. And we did quite a lot of formulation work to make sure that the effects of the Mucuna Puriens, the L-Dopa, was not overbearing, like taking over the effects. Now, if you go up in dose, you'll notice it. It becomes more of a dopaminergic L-Dopa-y type of effect. We really dialed it in so that it's mild and it goes well with the other effects. And we'll get a little bit more into the nitty-gritty of why actually having dopamine around is going to result in more testosterone too. But really the main reason why Mucuna Puriens is in here is to balance the prolactin effects, and it seems to be really working for everyone who has tried it so far. And there were some concerns about people not wanting to take L-Dopa on a daily basis, but we explained, one, it's a full spectrum Mucuna Puriens extract, and it's at a very low dose of overall L-Dopa. So it's fine. Everyone seems to be fine with it now. I think it's a really cool addition. Mucuna Puriens, as we'll talk about a little bit later, also enhances testosterone production and balances the overall hormone profile. It also has good oxidation regulating effects. There's some cool stuff going on with Mucuna Puriens besides the L-Dopa, and it just fits really nicely with the effects. One thing that we always look for with testosterone boosting products is that they make you feel more confident, they make you feel more motivated. Well, guess what else does that? Dopamine. So if you add just a little bit of dopamine to that testosterone mix, testosterone, by the way, also increases dopamine, so there's a synergistic effect there as well. Having that dopamine present with the testosterone increase will double up on the confidence and motivation enhancing effects. And we've seen this a lot from initial reports. Motivation is through the roof, confidence is through the roof. I noticed this myself too. I've never felt as motivated to go to the gym as I have now. It's really nice. Yes. Erika can attest to this. I've been very consistently
You've been super
going.
Consistent. I'm very proud of you.
And I've definitely been making some gains. Yeah. And like every time I go to the gym and I come back from the gym, I feel invigorated. And that doesn't really happen when I'm not on Eurycomax. So I think that's really cool. I've seen my strength go up. I think I've seen some musculature increases, but I've also just been regularly going to the gym. So
I certainly have. Mm-hmm.
Great.
Yeah.
I've seen my weights go up, so I'm clearly getting stronger. I feel more confident in the gym too. It's just more fun. It's a really good thing to take for gym-goers.
Absolutely. I haven't been going to the gym. I've only been roller skating alongside Emiel. I also haven't been taking Eurycomax, so I can't say that my condition improvement has anything to do with Eurycomax, but your conditioning is definitely improving.
Yeah. And
I think your muscle building and just your strength overall, the fact that you're roller skating. We also recently got recumbent bikes.
Oh yeah.
And going to the gym, you're doing a lot of exercise. Mm-hmm. And I think you're gaining muscle. You're definitely getting heavier, but you are also getting more muscular.
Yeah, that's a cool thing. So I look leaner, but I'm getting heavier on the scale, which means I'm building up lean muscle mass, which is really cool. Also, I'm taking things like cyanidin 3-glucoside, black ginger. It's getting warmer out. We're doing more cardio, so there's definitely something to be said there too. But like in the winter, I was around 92, 93 kilos, and I didn't look as lean as I do now, but now I'm like 95, 96 kilos sometimes even. So I really do seem to be putting on some muscle mass and staying lean. I think that's exactly what everyone is looking for. You want to, well, what most men are looking for. We want to become bigger, stronger, faster, whatever. Okay, so let's stay on topic here so we can get through this.
So at this point, are we ready to jump into the super detailed background from each ingredient, or is there anything else to cover for just the more general listener or someone who may have stumbled upon this video, why this is a good beginner Tongkat Ali product?
Yeah, we're almost there. We still have 3 ingredients to cover.
Okay.
So we've really covered the main core of it. So the Tongkat Ali 10% Eurycomax extract, the cold water ultrasonic assisted Tongkat Ali extract, more full spectrum. Then we have the Horny Goat wheat 10% Icariin to balance the estradiol, to get some more blood flow, erection quality, things like that. And then we have the Mucuna Puriens to balance the prolactin levels, increase luteinizing hormone, increase testosterone, has some other effects, confidence boosting, motivation boosting. So I think for all of that, this already encompasses a lot of aspects of Tongkat Ali and elevates them to a level that is very noticeable but very smooth. And I think for that reason, it's a really good beginner product. No one seems to be having any glaring issues with it, which again is why I think it's a good beginner product. Like, you can basically be guaranteed that if you take Eurycomax, it's going to work well if this is the kind of effects profile you're looking for.
There was something that I wanted to mention, and that was, if you are watching us on YouTube but you're not a part of our subreddit, r/Nootropics Depot, you should definitely subscribe, and that's where you can read people's experiences, their first-hand experience and their reviews after taking the product for a couple of weeks. And I think that is a really exciting and interesting part of Nootropics Depot. The subreddit has grown so much over the last couple of years, like incredibly, almost exponentially.
We almost have 40,000 members now.
It's really fascinating, and it's also really cool to just be able to read everyday people, anonymous people's experience with these products. And I think it's pretty fascinating too that people are not having negative effects. And this is a pretty big contrast compared to the 2 and 10% Tongkat Ali products, which are really just more focused for a specific purpose, and they have a very distinct effects profile as well.
Yeah, I would say like the Tongkat Ali 2% and the Tongkat Ali 10% extracts, they are still very much products that people are going to want to use, especially if you want even higher amounts of Eurycomax. Like, a lot of the people who take the Eurycomax 10% extract are taking like 2 or 3 capsules a day. Those are the people who really want to push it as high as possible. But I will say this, for your beginner average person who's not trying to maybe win a natural bodybuilding competition or whatever it may be, you might not want to use Tongkat Ali 2% and Tongkat Ali 10% because those are really tools and you need to know how to use them. Just like a woodworker, you can give them a powerful bandsaw, they'll be able to use it well. You don't want to give a powerful bandsaw to someone who's never used a powerful bandsaw and with no instructions, because they're probably going to not have the best time. And that's kind of what especially the Tongkat Ali 10% is like. If you have no experience with testosterone boosting, bodybuilding supplements, it's probably going to be too much and you're not going to be able to utilize that tool how you should be able to utilize it. Now with Eurycomax, that kind of goes away. I think anyone can just pick this up, start taking it, and get good effects with it. And I think that's what really makes it a very attractive beginner Tongkat Ali product, but also something for advanced people to take.
That's super clear. That's really, I love how you put that. And if anyone is curious about my experience taking the Tongkat Ali 10%, I did get extremely nauseous, and I also found myself...
2%.
Oh, it was the 2%. Yeah. Okay. Well, the nausea, that was still there. I also felt incredibly aggressive like very, very aggressive. Too much so for my comfort level.
That is something. I do think Eurycomax is smoother in that sense, partially maybe because of that cold water ultrasonic extract, and also the Horny Goat weed, which has some GABAergic calming effects. In some of the other ingredients, we'll touch on in just a sec, it's a little bit more smoothed out. I do feel more aggressive though, which I'm not a huge fan of. I will probably switch back to Systemax just because of that, and maybe like if there's a month where I'm trying to do some like progressive overload in the gym, like go higher and higher weights, maybe for like a month I would take Eurycomax. I'm just a very chill guy. I like being a really chill guy, and like Eurycomax takes a little bit of that chill away, and I don't necessarily need that in my life. Like I am 194 centimeters, 6'4", 95 kilos, like 215 pounds or something like that. I don't necessarily have to be out there acting aggressive because I'm a big guy, and I don't want to be a big aggressive guy. I want to be a friendly giant. For other people who maybe have some like confidence issues, or you need to be more aggressive in your job, like this is a really good product. But if you're not trying to invite that level of aggression into your life, maybe it's not the best product for you. And something like Systemax kind of pulls off exactly what Eurycomax does, but in a more chill way. This is why I'm a huge fan of Systemax. It's really nice and chill, keeps me relaxed, my mood high, but it also increases my testosterone levels, my growth hormone levels. It increases my gym performance, just not as much as Eurycomax. I could probably take just a single dose of Eurycomax, and that would be a little bit less, but I'm definitely like a little bit more ready for a fight. Which is not always a bad thing.
No, not always a bad thing. I personally feel really clear-headed on this.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't feel any kind of edgy aggression at all. So, in the beginning of the podcast, I was very skeptical. And now that the product is kicking in very subtly, I think you're right when you say that it's good for people who haven't taken this before. It is subtle, so maybe it's also going to be a little bit more challenging to identify the perceptible benefits, but so far it feels like a really nice fit, actually.
Yeah.
For me.
I think you would like this, and I think for you sometimes, like you're teaching and you have a lot of these little boys who are also really trying to challenge you at this point. I think in that sense, like being a bit more like, hey, I also have your secret male thing going on, I can be more aggressive too, is maybe a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And for those of you who are curious, my main work these days is teaching music to children, to groups of children. And so I'm really active in using my body, and I'm singing, and I'm clapping my hands, and I'm stomping my feet. And I'm also listening to 26 sometimes very small and very loud people and trying to manage their behavior and keep their attention. And that means that I'm working really hard and basically sweating the whole day. And it would be really useful to have even more confidence and even more ability to push through frustration or just through those difficult moments. Because basically everybody's got to follow the leader.
Yeah.
And the leader needs to have, everything under control and an exciting and a high level of momentum to move everything forward. So
absolutely,
this might be a good fit.
Yeah, it could very well be.
Yeah. And not only for the little boys, because the little girls have their issues too, but that's a different story.
Yeah.
But it is really interesting to just kind of settle into the effects, because it's very different than what I would have anticipated from my experience with just the Tongkat Ali extracts that I've tried in the past.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I really feel it too now. Like,
Mm-hmm.
one thing I always notice with anything kind of dopaminergic, especially Eurycomax, this like warm kind of fuzzy feeling that kind of starts at the back of my head and goes kind of over. really nice. And then that kind of goes into intensity. I have this with all kind of dopaminergics too. If I take Suboxone or other really stimulating things and I hop on a call, I'm much more aggressive. I'm jumping down people's throats. It's not always a good thing. Sometimes it's a good thing when you really need to tap into that. And Eurycomax is really good for that. Like, if I were going to give a presentation or something like that, and I needed to be a little bit more boastful, a little bit more cocky, like really convince people of what I'm trying to tell you, like on this podcast maybe, then it's a really good effect. It makes me, it's easier to talk, it's easier to be more direct with the points that I want to make. Really nice effects profile. And by the way, I also have this with other things that really boost testosterone. When I broke my wrist many years ago, I took some LGD 4033 for a little bit. Many of you probably know what that is. And that just made me so aggressive, I had to stop taking it after a couple of days. There was some research on it that it helped with bone remineralization, and it was being used clinically for some broken bones, so I thought, hey, that's a good one. It was unbearable for me how aggressive it made me, like that real roid rage type feeling. And I don't get it to that extent with Eurycomax, but it's there, and I feel it building the longer I take it. So I might also be particularly sensitive to that. I do think one really cool thing to mention there is if testosterone makes me aggressive and Eurycomax is making me particularly aggressive more so than other testosterone boosters, then this is probably a really good testosterone booster for me. And I'm noticing it in the gym too. My strength increases are quicker, they're more rewarding, and I also really associate this with testosterone. And look at this from the standpoint that I have been taking Systemax for many years, which I know will also be boosting my testosterone levels, and when I take Systemax I also feel stronger, I also feel more confident, but with Eurycomax it's just at another level. I think stacking Systemax and Eurycomax would be really interesting too. I'm going to try that at a certain point as well, see how that interacts in the gym and just how I feel on that, but know that maybe based on my aggression experience that it's a good thing. And I know many people on Reddit are looking for that added aggression because they want to go to the gym and they want to scream at their deadlift bar that has 500 pounds on it and rip it off the ground. I'm not there yet. I don't need that level of aggression. If you're like a powerlifter and that's your life, you need to be aggressive, or maybe you're an MMA fighter or something like that. Like, this is fantastic. I can imagine if I was a boxer or something like that, I could really beat the shit out of people on Eurycomax. It would be awesome. Even though that's something I don't think I would normally really have the ability to, I think I could really let loose and go in a ring on this kind of stuff. Anyways, moving on, not promoting violence or anything like that here. Peaceful guy. We got micronized pregnenolone in here, and pregnenolone is one of the main precursors to testosterone and other steroid hormones. It's at the very top of the steroidogenic enzyme pathway, so it starts with pregnenolone, and from pregnenolone all of the steroid hormones are made. So DHEA is also made from pregnenolone, but then testosterone is made from pregnenolone, and eventually estrogen, also some of the stress hormones. So it kind of all starts with pregnenolone. Adding that in there, you get this nice precursor, and it seems to enhance the overall effects profile. Pregnenolone is also a little bit mood boosting, a little bit calming, so it really just fits into the overall picture here too. We left out DHEA this time, so in Systemax we have 2.5 milligrams of pregnenolone, 2.5 milligrams of DHEA. The whole idea in the back of our heads was eventually when we come out with Eurycomax, people are going to want to take Systemax and Eurycomax, and they should come together. So the ideal dose for pregnenolone and DHEA is 5 milligrams. So if you take those two together, you would be getting 5 milligrams pregnenolone, 5 milligrams DHEA. However, we ran into something that we weren't really expecting, and that's that in many countries over the world, DHEA is not allowed. I think this is partially because DHEA has been WADA banned, so in the Olympics and things like that, you cannot take DHEA. Also in like professional sport events where you're getting drug tested, DHEA is not allowed. And obviously because products like Systemax and Eurycomax are for athletes, maybe professional athletes too, we didn't put DHEA in this time. So one, that all athletes could take it, and two, that in those countries like Canada, for example, where DHEA is not allowed, people can now order Eurycomax without any issues. With that in mind, Systemax still contains DHEA. We are probably going to take that out so that it's also easier to ship to Canada and people can take it in professional sports more easily. And then for the people who are saying, oh, wait, I really like the DHA, please don't take it out. Well, we offer standalone DHA, so you can always add it in. Easy peasy. But at least then everyone can enjoy it. So that's one of the reasons why there's no DHA in here. From a pure effects standpoint, DHA would be a good addition in here. So order some DHEA, take it with Eurycomax and see if that helps. And then I think, three more actually. We have boron in here, boron glycinate. So boron is a really important mineral, and the important thing to note about boron is that there's something called sex hormone binding globulin, SHBG. And SHBG binds to testosterone and transports testosterone around, but when testosterone is bound to SHBG, it can't act on the androgen receptors. So basically, bound up testosterone is more easily able to travel around your body, but it isn't doing anything. So you want free testosterone that is not bound to SHBG. Now, boron lowers SHBG numbers, and because of that, causes a rapid increase in free testosterone. And free testosterone you can feel more and is going to have more of those androgenic properties. So that's an important thing too. There's also some really minor evidence that Tongkat Ali itself can reduce SHBG and can increase free testosterone. So that's a good thing. But we decided to boost that up a little bit more with boron. So boron, in the overall picture, more free testosterone. Another interesting thing about boron is that it seems to inhibit some of the enzymes that break down estradiol. And because of this, estradiol can last a little bit longer. And because one of the issues with Tongkat Ali in the past has been a reduction in estradiol, having a little bit of boron in the mix can help that overall estradiol picture too. So, and boron is good for bones. So just if you're a bodybuilder and you need to keep or you're a professional athlete and you need to keep your bones strong, boron is a good one. So
this is also a good one for women who've experienced menopause, because everybody knows as your testosterone levels decrease, then your bones also become more fragile over time. So this would also be
that's actually estrogen.
Estrogen.
Yes.
But would it also make sense that testosterone is decreasing? Estrogen is also decreasing.
Yeah.
That's causing more fragile bones?
Yes. So the way in which you make testosterone is testosterone gets converted to estrogen through an enzyme called aromatase.
Okay.
So if you have low testosterone levels, you will have low estrogen levels.
In which case your bones will become weaker.
Yes.
Okay.
And there's a big problem with just administering straight estradiol. It can cause things like blood clots, breast cancer issues, all sorts of things. So treating menopausal symptoms is kind of tricky because you don't really want to be administering estrogens, although the estrogens are what helps. Now, if you go one step back and you increase testosterone levels and you just let your body do its natural thing and convert that testosterone into estrogen, that seems to be a much better way to top up those hormone levels in menopause. I think that's a really interesting thing to note, especially because a lot of women, I've seen this a lot, even at the office many years ago when we first came out with Tongkat Ali. I was offering it to some women and they said, oh, hell no, I'm not going to take that. I'm going to grow a beard. I'm going to get a wide jaw. It's going to masculinize me. No. You have testosterone in your body. If you boost it naturally, that's not going to happen. Yes, if you're injecting high amounts of testosterone, like some female bodybuilders do, you will look like a bit of a freak. You will masculinize. It's going to make you look very, very, very different. That is not the case with something like this. We're not hitting like 2,000 nanomoles per liter like these really, really high super physiological levels of testosterone. That's not going to happen with Eurycomax. So also, guys, don't get your hope up. You're not going to be competing against professional bodybuilders who are basically all doing steroids with Eurycomax. You will be able to compete in the natural bodybuilding federations, although I have my doubts that many of those guys are natural too. But if you care about your health and you want to get strong and you don't want to take steroids to look a certain way, then I think these are much better options. Although, probably shouldn't have said that, so maybe I didn't say that. Okay, then last but not least, or almost last but not least, is iodine. Iodine is really interesting for a multitude of reasons, and why it works in the context of Tongkat Ali is still a little bit unknown, but we saw quite a few reports on Reddit where people were saying Tongkat Ali wasn't working that well for me. Once I added iodine to the mix, then it started working well. So why might that be? We did a bunch of research into this, and it turns out that thyroid hormones also modulate things like luteinizing hormone and testosterone production. So if you have hypothyroidism, basically your thyroid is not working as well as it should. Maybe if that's at a very like subclinical level, you're not like straight hypothyroidism, you just don't have that many thyroid hormones for whatever reason that may be, then it's going to be a little bit harder to produce testosterone. And that means if you take something like Tongkat Ali, it's probably not going to do exactly what you want it to do. Now, you add some iodine in there. Iodine is very important for making these thyroid hormones. Your thyroid hormones go up, and all of a sudden all that machinery seems to turn on. That seems to be the case for certain Redditors. There seems to be some evidence on that, so we put a little bit of iodine in there. I think just in general, iodine makes people feel better. We're probably all not getting enough iodine. Thyroid hormones are good for mood. They're good for staying nice and slim, because when your thyroid hormones are high, you burn through more calories and you stay leaner. So it seems to be a good thing to just bump that up a little bit, and especially in this case, because it's all synergistic. And then last but not least, we have, yes, I was just making sure it was on the actual label because I didn't see it on the supplement facts. It's actually in the other ingredients. You'll see sodium caprate. Sodium caprate is in there because it enhances bioavailability. There's quite a lot of research on this. It's a P-glycoprotein inhibitor. This is a pump that exists in your gastrointestinal system that basically absorbs a compound but then can also spit it back out into your gastrointestinal system. If you shut that pump off, then you can absorb compounds more readily and retain them more readily, and that seems to work for Tongkat Ali and some of the other things in here, so we put a little bit of sodium caprate in there to really round it out. So, okay, now we have a really good idea, I think, of what's going on.
Absolutely.
Let's maybe have another little check-in. Has the effects changed at all for you?
Honestly, no. The effects have not changed a whole lot. I think that first time that we started talking about the effects, that's really when I noticed a difference, a shift. And for me, that shift feels like more energy and more confidence, which the result is a quieter mind.
Yeah.
It's easier for me to focus. And even though that doesn't necessarily always sound like the roadblock to confidence, I do think that when it comes to having conversations and working with people in a social situation, anytime that I second guess my words or anytime that I start to think a little bit too much while I'm in a conversation, that takes away from the connection that I have with that person. That takes away from the flow. And that's the effect that I really noticed kind of turning on at that 25-minute mark, was all of a sudden I felt like I had just arrived in the flow just from having taken Eurycomax.
Nice.
Yeah, which is a unique feeling. But it hasn't necessarily increased. I don't really feel a particularly distinct sense of stimulation. It is very subtle, but it's there for sure.
Yeah. And for those curious, let me just pull it up real quick. So it's 200 milligrams of the Mucuna Puriens at 15%. So I believe that's 30 milligrams of L-Dopa. Very, very low amount. So But if we were to take another dose now, that stimulation would increase. It would still be smooth, but it would be more pronounced. And that's one of the reasons we didn't do it, because I don't think that would be an accurate representation of what this does. It will scale in quite a different way. We want that Mucuna Puriens L-Dopa feeling to be very mild. Alright, so we've kind of reached that point where we're about to switch gears and get into the more technical, nitty-gritty stuff, but before we do that, I do want to kind of go over some of the effects that you might expect to feel with this. So I think we've covered a lot of them. One thing we haven't necessarily covered is the libido aspect. The first couple of doses you take, the libido effect isn't going to be super pronounced. The first week it will start building, and the second and third week it will become very, very pronounced. We've now heard reports from quite a few people on Reddit that have said that the libido increase is almost annoying. It's that intense. So if that's something that you really need help with, I think Eurycomax is going to be really good. If you're single and you don't have a sexual partner, maybe it's frustrating if you take Eurycomax, but maybe it's a motivation.
Picking up from that point, I haven't been taking Eurycomax as a part of my stack, but Emiel has.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, maybe these are coming from reports on Reddit or on YouTube. I'm not sure who is finding this libido increase annoying, but I personally don't find it annoying.
And it is there. So that's a good thing. I think a libido increase for most people is good, and we're joking about it a little bit. Like, it makes you feel like a teenage boy kind of effect, right? Like, sex is on the mind all day kind of effect, which can be distracting. I don't. It's not like that for me, but there's definitely a serious increase in libido. And what's interesting, that when I go to the gym and I'm working out, like, that effect almost seems to increase. I think there's definitely some synergy. If you're working out, we know working out, especially, at least not if you're pushing it really, really high, but if you're doing some moderate, good, heavy lifting, things like that, testosterone levels seem to go up. Combine that with a testosterone increasing supplement, and you got two things going at the same time, and that really seems to help. So there's a serious libido increase, and because of that horny goat weed, erection quality and things like that can be better. So I think as an overall libido supporting supplement, Eurycomax is a good one. As a muscle building supplement, it's good. As a confidence motivation boosting supplement, it's good. I think for a lot of people, this will be a really good mood boosting supplement too. Like, if you're kind of sitting at home feeling sorry for yourself, you can't find the motivation to go out and get moving or go out and be social, I think Eurycomax will be the thing that will push you out the door, will get you into the world, will get you conversing with people, will kind of give you that push. And of course, if your testosterone levels are low, like maybe you've taken a blood test and you see your testosterone levels are low, maybe you're considering some TRT or something like that, maybe try something like Eurycomax out first. I think you'll get a lot of the effects. If that doesn't work, go down that path, but maybe start with something like Eurycomax. And there is plenty of scientific research too. Tongkat Ali definitely increases testosterone levels. We've seen it in blood tests. It increases testosterone levels of our customers. I'm expecting Eurycomax does it even better. It certainly feels like it. It has all of the stereotypical qualities of an increase in testosterone. Even if that testosterone increase isn't as maybe intense as I'm maybe perceiving it to be, the fact that I feel like this is really nice. It's achieving everything I want with a testosterone booster and more. Maybe a little bit too much for me, which is probably why I'm going to switch back to Systemax. Or maybe a really interesting thing would be to like take one capsule of Systemax and one capsule of Eurycomax. So half them both, and yeah, maybe I'll play around with that. But
I'm going to encourage you to keep taking at least half a dose of Eurycomax. Yeah, and that's all I'll say on that topic.
So yeah, maybe the romantic partner in your life is probably really happy that you're taking Tongkat Ali.
Yeah, perhaps before you make changes to your daily stack, you could also consider the other part of the equation if you happen to have a partner, because you never know.
It is really nice. So
I have to say, I haven't noticed an unpleasant increase in aggression from you. Like maybe you've felt that on the inside, but I wouldn't say that it's been unpleasant in any way.
No, I wouldn't say so either. It's just more something where I have to pull myself back a little bit more. Whereas normally I don't necessarily have to do that. It's more like when I'm talking to some colleagues, if any of my colleagues are watching this, you've gotten a strong worded message from me. It's the Eurycomax, I swear. But that's more where I'm going with it. It's more like in a professional setting, I'm usually quite direct already, so if I increase that directness a little bit more, maybe it can come off a little bit insensitive, whereas I'm just trying to get to the point. I'm focused, I'm confident, I'm going. And if you're not going my speed, I'm gonna have a problem with you. That's kind of the feeling I have. So if I'm around someone who's dragging, they're not doing their best, they're messing things up a lot, that's going to bother me more than if I'm not taking Eurycomax, which unfortunately in life you're going to meet a lot of people who are going to slow you down, and in that scenario I would rather be a little bit more chill. Like if I'm on the phone with someone for my internet provider or something, I don't necessarily want to have a short fuse with them, but that's kind of something that Eurycomax can do. I'm very good at regulating all of that. I think many people are really good at regulating that, so I don't think it's necessarily an issue, but it's something to be aware of. You will feel more assertive, you will feel a little bit more aggressive towards adversaries. If you're around people you like, it's just going to be a positive thing. But yeah, unfortunately, at least for me, I'm around a lot of people that I don't like on a daily basis, whether that's rude people in the train. Recently, there was a guy, we were in a bar in Amsterdam, and he just poured himself a beer behind the bar at our favorite bar that we've been going to for a while, and like something like that on Eurycomax, I would like want to try and fight this person. Whereas that is not something that would ever come up in me, but something like that, I would be really, really irked, and I would really have to control myself not to shout at this person, which I did shout at that person without Eurycomax. So,
Yeah.
Stuff like that. But in a normal everyday scenario, it's good, and maybe it is good that people who are acting like assholes should get a little bit more of that Eurycomax justice.
It's really interesting because I feel like this effect that I'm experiencing right now just from one dose, I want more of it. And I do think that this would help me in professional situations, but especially because I really have to fight for my voice to be heard. Like literally, that is literally a part of my job, and I'm constantly being challenged. My leadership and what I'm saying, it's constantly being challenged by kids moving around or falling or not paying attention or whatever, and so I have to constantly remind and refresh and restart, and that takes a lot of energy, and I wonder how it would feel after a full day of teaching if Eurycomax was a part of my stack, if I would have just that much more motivation to like have a normal evening rather than just coming home and wanting to go straight to bed. And the experience that I'm having on this podcast too, sometimes when I'm sitting here I can feel so relaxed, and I feel that I'm in a passive role that I can get a little bit sleepy. I am like #sleepy girl basically all the time. I don't feel sleepy at all. And I don't feel, I don't feel that kind of weight pulling down. So I think this is definitely going to be interesting to see how people experience Eurycomax, depending on your personality, because I feel like if anything, Eurycomax would be a really good supplement for me, both because of the type of work that I do. It's very social, and I have to keep that confidence level and that energy super high, but also because my personality is a lot more laid back and quiet, and I think for most women, we often struggle to get our voice heard, so I also think that if you are a woman in a leadership role, this could help you not necessarily to like eliminate issues of having your authority challenged, but it takes away that kind of questioning voice that can often quiet my actual voice, like the questioning voice in my mind that says, no, don't say that, or it doesn't matter. That's not there.
And a really interesting point on that, one of the women I've met professionally, and I won't mention her name or who she works for privacy's sake, but she is the CEO of a pretty big company, and the meeting with her, she was quite confident, more so than other women I've had meetings with, which was, I really enjoy that. So maybe that's something to do with the Tongkat Ali. It's probably also just because she's been in the industry for a long time and is the CEO of a company that's doing really well. So obviously you have to be in that role. But she is taking Tongkat Ali, so maybe there's something there. I can tell in this podcast, even just, and it's probably just a little bit more of the L-Dopa, like maybe there is something from the Tongkat Ali, but those effects take a little bit longer to get going, but you do seem more confident. You're jumping in a little bit quicker. It's an even more dynamic conversation, which is really nice.
Yeah.
I'm really enjoying this podcast just from a talking perspective. It definitely gives me a little bit of that motor mouth feeling, which is, again, a bit of a dopaminergic thing. Many stimulants also make people chatty. Many stimulants increase dopamine. So, all right. With that said, I don't want this to get too long, so let's dive into the more scientific stuff. If you've made it this far and you're not that interested in the scientific stuff, probably a good time to log off. So thank you for watching. But if you're staying around, you're going to learn some cool stuff too. So I think maybe a lot of people that are here already know how Tongkat Ali increases testosterone levels, but I'll do a quick run through. A lot of the research is done on Eurycomax. Like I mentioned earlier, there's some research on the uripeptides, but I question it. Everyone at Nootropics Depot kind of questions whether the uripeptide research is valid, so we're not going to focus a whole lot on that. Let's focus on Eurycomax. So Eurycomax does quite a few things. Like we mentioned earlier, it is an aromatase inhibitor. Aromatase is an enzyme that converts testosterone to estrogen. So basically, when you have a lot of testosterone, you see this especially in bodybuilders who are using some other more stronger stuff. If your testosterone levels go really, really high, you will also start creating quite a lot of estrogen. And then that estrogen acts as a negative feedback loop to basically turn off testosterone synthesis. So estrogen goes up, or testosterone goes up, estrogen turns it off, things balance out again. That way we're never going like super, super, super high in testosterone, which some of us want for athletic purposes. So one way to break that feedback loop is to reduce the levels of estradiol, which Tongkat Ali definitely seems to do, because we've seen people with very low estradiol levels, which is of course why we added in one pregnenolone a little bit. That seems to help there with estrogen synthesis a bit, and of course the horny goat weed, which helps with estrogen synthesis. And I think the aromatase effects of Tongkat Ali are strong enough where it's doing a little bit too much of a good thing at higher doses of Eurycomax. So when you can balance that out with Icariin, which increases the aromatase enzyme, then the overall decrease in aromatase is at a very nice balance level. So the dose of Icariin is low enough where all it's doing is just kind of modifying the power of Eurycomax on that aromatase enzyme. But that is where a lot of the magic lies with Tongkat Ali. It is decreasing the conversion of testosterone to estrogen, which one means we have more testosterone because less of that testosterone is being converted to estrogen, which means more testosterone is floating around in your body. And secondly, because estrogen is a negative modulator of testosterone, then reducing estradiol levels, estrogen levels will kick up even more testosterone production. Now, if we go a little bit into the HPA axis, the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, or the HPG axis, the hypothalamus pituitary gonadal axis, that's where Tongkat Ali works a little bit too. So there's a pretty complex cascade of things that happens when testosterone synthesis is kicked on, and a lot of that testosterone synthesis is kicked on in Leydig cells, which are in your testicles mostly. And for women, those Leydig cells are, I think, in the ovaries. So both kind of in that genitalia area, that's where a lot of this production is happening. But the signals are being sent from your brain. That's why the hypothalamus, the pituitary, those are in your brain, and they send signals down your nervous system into your testicles to those Leydig cells, and then those Leydig cells get triggered to produce more testosterone. Part of how that happens is also, if estrogen is there, it can kind of turn that system off. So again, less estrogen, that system works better. There's not this off switch. Which is really smart, by the way. Like, having super high levels of testosterone is also not necessarily good. I believe if you go over 1,000 nanograms, then there's diminishing returns, and there's actually maybe some bad things that happen with such high levels of testosterone. I mean, just look at a lot of the bodybuilders who are having very high levels of testosterone. Many of them don't get so old. They have lots of issues. They need to do a lot of extra work to make sure that their bodies keep running efficiently and don't completely shut down. It's not a great thing to have super high levels of testosterone. So it's good that we have this checks and balance system, and I think it's a really smart system where you have testosterone can convert to estrogen acts as an off switch, but that you can also modulate that pathway pretty quickly. And of course, some people just produce more estrogen. Their aromatase enzyme is maybe working at overdrive, and all of the testosterone they're producing just goes to estrogen and then switches the whole system back off, and then you have really low levels of testosterone. Even if you're a young person, we see this sometimes. Young people will do a blood test and their testosterone levels will come in really low. Now, for those people, taking something like Tongkat Ali might change things up a bit, and I think Eurycomax, especially with all of the supporting ingredients in it, will really help kick that system back on. But this is one of the things Tongkat Ali is doing. So, and it's modulating the HPA and the HPG axis, and there it also seems like perhaps it is tricking us into thinking estrogen levels are a little bit lower. It might be doing this by acting on estrogen receptors, kind of like a selective estrogen receptor modulator. The evidence for that is a little bit weak, but there seems to be something there. There has been some research on it. And if that's the case, if we're tricking our HPA and HPG axis into thinking there's less estrogen than there actually is, then we can kick on more testosterone synthesis. And part of that also comes through a hormone called luteinizing hormone, or LH, as many of you have probably seen it. And if you kick on LH more, you can produce even more testosterone. So we get those aromatase effects, maybe some estrogen receptor modulation going on with Tongkat Ali. And then there's also Tongkat Ali upregulates one of the important steroidogenic enzymes, which increases the synthesis of these steroid hormones, including testosterone. So that's also really important. Lost my train of thought. What was I going to say? Oh yeah, luteinizing hormone. And this luteinizing hormone, we've seen this a lot with, for example, Fedoja. So Tongkat Ali, all of these mechanisms, it increases testosterone synthesis, and then if you add something on top of it that also increases luteinizing hormones, then testosterone synthesis really goes through the roof. One of these things has been Fedoja agrestis, and this is a supplement that's been made popular by Andrew Huberman and Joe Rogan. I believe they discussed it on the podcast. I think it's an interesting one, except it seems that it might have some toxicity concerns, and there isn't enough human evidence to say that it's not toxic. It's also hard to get a hold of the real stuff, although that situation seems to have improved quite a lot over the years. But one of the main things with Fedoja agrestis is that it is very good at increasing luteinizing hormone. So when you take Tongkat Ali with something like Fedoja agrestis, then you get even more testosterone synthesis happening, and that efficiency goes up. Now, one alternative we've said for many years is Cystange, because Cystange also increases luteinizing hormone. So if you stack Cystange with Tongkat Ali, you get a better effect. Many people have noticed this effect. They are very synergistic. That's also why we designed Eurycomax and Systemax to be compatible with each other, because if you really want to boost things up as much as you can naturally, then you should be taking those two together. Now with Eurycomax, we did another interesting thing. How do we increase luteinizing hormone without putting Cystange in it? Because we want this to be a Tongkat Ali focused product. And one of the things that we found was Mucuna Puriens, because when you increase dopamine levels, luteinizing hormone goes up. And Mucuna Puriens as a whole also seems to have some positive effects apart from dopamine on luteinizing hormone. So that's one way we've been able to increase luteinizing hormone in a novel way in this stack that then enhances the overall testosterone production. Now, testosterone and dopamine are also highly synergistic. More testosterone usually leads to alterations in the dopaminergic system, and alterations in dopamine increase testosterone synthesis. So just those two are very synergistic together. That's why Mucuna Puriens is in there. Let's see. Is there anything else going on with Horny Goat weed except for the aromatase, the PDE5 inhibition? I think beyond that, there's not a whole lot that it does for actual testosterone, for androgens. Now, for boron, we already explained how that one works. Actually, I've infused quite a lot of technical details into this whole podcast. Yeah. So it was really that last little bit, getting nitty-gritty into those systems of what's happening in your brain, signaling to your Leydig cells. That's really where Tongkat Ali is active. Mucuna Puriens boosts that effect up a lot, and I think the Horny Goat weed balances that effect out, because it's all kind of based on decreasing estrogen and increasing testosterone, and for many people there seems to be an imbalance there. Like, testosterone being here, estrogen being here is not good. Maybe we wanted more like that. And I think that's kind of what we achieved with putting a low dose of Icariin in. It seems to have balanced that out, but we're not losing the effectiveness. And in fact, maybe we're even increasing the efficacy by balancing that system a little bit more. But that's really at the heart of it, is we are modulating the estrogen side of it. We're modulating basically the off switch for testosterone production, so we can basically turn it on in a controlled way as to not increase testosterone too rapidly, but have a really nice overall balanced effect. Am I missing anything else? Not really.
You've been really thorough. This has been a really interesting and very dynamic podcast, and I think the pace of it has also been much faster than our last couple of podcasts, because the last month we talked about Infinigreens. This is a really fun podcast because Infinigreens has 14 ingredients, so we break down every single one of them and we go super in depth. And the podcast before that was Clonia Cava, right?
Yeah.
But the mood and the pace from that podcast was completely different, because that is a super relaxing product and it feels almost recreational. And this is a completely different feeling. I can tell that you really got the motor on. There's a fire beneath you, and it's been really fun to listen to. So I hope that's been the case for all of you as well. Thanks for sticking around and listening this far. Is there anything you wanted to add at the end?
Honestly, not really. Are there maybe any questions that you have? I'm trying to think if I've missed anything. Let me take another look at the bottom.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Promotes testosterone synthesis. Well, we covered that.
Absolutely.
Supports muscle mass and strength. We covered that. Improves physical performance. We covered that. Supports a healthy libido. We covered that. And improved bioavailability. We covered that. That's the sodium caprate. And of course, the combination of the two Tongkats, which... Also, if you're curious what that split is, we have 800 milligrams of the cold water ultrasonic extract, and we have 50 milligrams of the 10% Eurycomanone extract. That's half the dose of what a full dose of Eurycomanone 10% extract is. So that's the split there. 200 milligrams of Horny Goat weed with 10% Icariin. So 20 milligrams of Icariin. 2.5 milligrams of pregnenolone, 1.5 milligrams of boron glycinate, and 100 micrograms of iodine. Actually, sorry, 1.5 milligrams of elemental boron from boron glycinate, and then with iodine it's 100 micrograms of iodine from potassium iodide. Yeah, I really can't think of anything else to say. This has been an important podcast for me because we've been working on it so long. I think as a brand, we really started to take off once we started selling Tongkat Ali, at least in the natural products. Obviously, we started in kind of a different segment and we were very popular there, but we really wanted to shift our focus to the naturals, and thank God we did with all of the things that have happened over the last couple of years. And I think Tongkat Ali really cemented us as a natural product provider because no one else, at least back then, and I think still, has this high quality of Tongkat Ali extracts that have this much bioactives in there. A lot of the ones we see have like under 1% Eurycomax. You're probably getting just a couple of milligrams. Here, you're getting really quite a lot of Eurycomax. It's strong, it feels strong, you can feel it from the first dose, and it increases over time, and it just gets better and better. I can't really think of a better natural product, especially if you're into bodybuilding, confidence, public speaking, those kind of things. Especially maybe if you're a guy and you feel like maybe you don't feel masculine enough. This is a masculinizing supplement. There's nothing else quite like it. This will make you feel more manly. And I think for women, it will make you feel more womanly.
Yeah, I must say, like, this just makes me feel less stressed, less overwhelmed, less doubtful, and yeah, for that reason, I want to take it again tomorrow.
Nice.
Yeah.
Hey,
yeah.
Maybe it will end up in your stack too.
Yeah, maybe it will end up in my stack, and I'm glad that we went through it just another time, because of course on these podcasts Emiel is repeating a lot of information, but you're also the product specialist and you're doing research constantly, and so especially with hormone products, I think there's just such a stigma that hormone products, especially products that kind of look like they're designed for men, I mean red, this is sort of like a intense masculine color, and we think of testosterone, we just think, okay, this is for men. That stigma is so powerful. It's powerful for me, even though I've been sitting next to you and learning about hormone processes for years on the podcast now. But we have to repeat these things over and over again, and I also have to repeat it to myself to remember, just because we're talking about testosterone doesn't mean that it's just going to have benefits for men. And now that I've actually taken the product just by itself, not as a part of my stack, I can feel the benefits already.
Yeah.
And I also don't feel as hesitant because the profile is quite subtle, but it is noticeable. So
yeah, it's certainly noticeable. And of course, like Erika mentioned, like we know what we're doing. We're good at marketing. We market this towards men. The imagery on the website, the imagery on the Instagram posts, probably the thumbnail of this video will probably be me AI edited onto like a super buff body or something like that. This is primarily a male-oriented product. It is a lot easier to sell to men. It wouldn't necessarily make sense for us to market this towards women. And also, the majority of our customer base are younger men, and this is exactly the product that they want. So from a business perspective, from a marketing perspective, we're not necessarily including women, but that's why I did really want to hit on that a lot in this podcast, because if there are any women watching, which probably the viewership amongst women will be low based on the thumbnail, based on the topic, but if you're here, I'm really glad that you've been listening to this, and yeah, I think there's a bit of an unfair stigma that women shouldn't be taking testosterone enhancing supplements because it will make you manly or something strange like that. It's not going to happen. You will become more confident. Maybe some men in your life won't like that. Fuck them. Keep going. Be confident. Do your thing. Take your next.
I think that's a wonderful place to end the podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks so much for interacting with us on all the platforms, on Reddit and on Instagram. and on YouTube as well. If you like this podcast and if you want to share the knowledge about Eurycomax and about Tongkat Ali with your friends, please send it to them. And we will come back next month with perhaps a new product.
Maybe. We have a lot in the pipeline. I'm not sure if we're going to be releasing anything in the next month, but we have some things that are like almost ready, so there is a chance, but it would be a stretch.
So you're saying there's a chance.
There is a chance.
In which case, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and please come back next month and check out all of the new research and insights we have to share with you, because there's a lot in the pipeline. So with that, we will say goodbye for now. See ya.